November 16, 2014, from Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois, it was the Minnesota Vikings at the Chicago Bears. The Bears won the toss and they elected to defer, and so the Vikings would start with the ball. They had it on their own 29. They were faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 36, and there ended up being a penalty against the defense, offsides, and that gave the Vikings a first down and kept their drive alive. And then Jerick McKinnon ran for 23 yards to bring the ball across midfield into the Chicago 36. He then lost 3 yards on the next play. Then an incomplete pass brought up 3rd and 13 from the Chicago 39, and Teddy Bridgewater hit McKinnon for a 7-yard pass. So now on 4th down from the 32, out came Blair Walsh to attempt a 50-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and the Vikings were on the scoreboard first with the score Minnesota 3, Chicago 0. So now the Bears would take over on their own 24 with about 11 and a half minutes left in the first quarter. They would end up marching down the field and getting into Minnesota territory. They were actually faced with a 3rd and 12 from the Chicago 45, and Cutler hit Forte, and he took it 30 yards all the way to the Minnesota 25. And then they were faced with a 2nd and 25, and Cutler ended up going to Forte again, but this time it was only for 4 yards, and that brought up 3rd down, and it was 3rd and 21 from the 36. Cutler went to Jeffery for a 7-yard pass, and out came Gould to attempt a 47-yarder. It was up, and it was no good. So the score remained 3-0, Minnesota over Chicago. And now the Vikings would take over on their own 37, and then they would end up faced with a 3rd and 6, and Bridgewater hit Ford for a 4-yard pass. That brought up 4th and 2 from the Minnesota 45. And out came the punting unit, but the Vikings went for a fake punt, and they ended up picking up 48 yards. So now it was 1st and goal on the 7, and then Teddy Bridgewater hit Ellison for a 7-yard touchdown pass, and it was now 10-0 Vikings over the Bears. So now the Bears took over on their own 19 with about 3 minutes left in the first. They would end up bringing the first quarter to a close when on 3rd and 6 from the 39, Cutler hit Jeffery for an 11-yard pass to make a first down. And after one, it was 10-0 Vikings over the Bears. So the Bears would open up the second quarter on the 50-yard line, and they were trailing by 10 points. Forte picked up 5 yards on 1st down, and on 2nd and 5, Cutler hit Marshall for a 14-yard pass to make it a first down on the Minnesota 31. Cutler then went to Forte for a 4-yard pass. Now it was 2nd and 6 from the Minnesota 27. Cutler dropped back to pass, and he hit Alshon Jeffery for the 27-yard touchdown. And it was now 10-7 as the Bears cut the Vikings' lead to just 3 points. So now the Vikings would get the ball on their own 20, but they would go 3 and out. And so the Bears defense got a big stop there, and they got the ball back for their offense, and the Bears would take over on their own 40-yard line with about 11 and a half minutes left in the second quarter. Cutler then hit Bennett for a 12-yard pass on 1st down to make it a first down in Minnesota territory on the 48. A couple plays later, it was 3rd and 6 from the Minnesota 44. Cutler dropped back and he hit Brandon Marshall for an 8-yard pass to make it a first down on the Minnesota 36. But their drive would end up stalling on the 42, and out would come the punting unit, and they would punt the ball to the Vikings. The Vikings would then go 3 and out for the second consecutive possession as they punted the ball back to the Bears, and the Bears now took over on their own 27 with about 4.5 minutes left before halftime. Cutler ended up picking up 7 yards on 1st down, and then Forte ran for 9 yards on 2nd and 3, and it was now a first down on the 43 of Chicago for the Bears. Cutler then dropped back to pass, and he hit Brandon Marshall for a 13-yard reception, and it was now a first down in Minnesota territory at the 44. Cutler then dropped back, and he hit Brandon Marshall for a 44-yard touchdown pass that now gave the Bears the lead as they were up 14-10 at this point. So it's 14-10 Chicago over Minnesota. And now with about a little less than 3 minutes left before halftime, Minnesota would take over on their own 26, but they would end up punting 6 plays later from their 39. So now the Bears got the ball with about a minute left before the end of the second quarter, and they ended up picking up a first down with a 15-yard run by Forte after he'd run for 7 yards on first down. So now it was a first down on the 48, but with only 15 seconds left on the clock, Cutler dropped back and he threw an interception. Rhodes picked him off, and the Vikings got the ball, but Bridgewater would take a knee, and this game would go to halftime. So at the intermission, the score was Chicago 14, Minnesota 10. The Bears would start things off in the third quarter, and they would have it on their own 17, and they would march down the field. They were faced with a 3rd and 4 from their own 23, and Cutler hit Wilson for a 6-yard pass, and then on 3rd and 1 from the 38, Matt Forte picked up 2 yards to keep the drive alive. They then picked up a first down with an 18-yard pass from Cutler to Jeffery to bring the ball into Minnesota territory, and on 1st and 10 from the 42, Cutler hit Jeffery for a 34-yard pass that made it 1st and goal on the 8. They got all the way up to the 1-yard line, but it was 4th and goal from the 1, and Cutler would try to sneak it in, but he got stopped short, and so the Bears turned the ball over on downs. So now the Vikings would take over on their own 1-yard line. They did get out of the shadow of their own end zone, but they would end up punting the ball from their 17-yard line 6 plays later. So now the Bears would take over with about 7 minutes left in the third. They had the ball at midfield in Minnesota territory on the 47. They ended up getting to the 34 when on 3rd and 9, Cutler dropped back and he was intercepted, this time by Smith. So now the Vikings took over on the Chicago 27. They wouldn't get a first down, but they would bring Blair Walsh out to attempt a 38-yard field goal from the 20. It was up and it was no good. So the wind was blowing in the Windy City, and the score remained Chicago 14, Minnesota 10. So now the Bears took over with about a minute and a half left in the third. They had the ball on their own 28. And after a 4-yard pass to Bennett, on 2nd and 6 from the 32, Matt Forte ran for 32 yards and brought the third quarter to a close with the score Chicago 14, Minnesota 10. So now to open up the fourth quarter, it was a first down for the Bears on the Minnesota 36. They were actually faced with a 3rd and 10 from the 36. 2 plays later, Cutler threw it to Bennett for a 9-yard pass, and that brought 4th and 1. They would end up going for it, and Matt Forte picked up 2 yards on the play. So now they ended up stopping because Munnerlyn was hurt on the play. But it was a first down for the Bears on the Minnesota 25. A couple plays later, it was 3rd and 1, and Forte would pick up a yard to pick up another first down, as he had picked up all the yards to pick up that first down right there. They just kept handing the ball to Forte, but now they would go to the air, and Cutler hit Jeffery for a 7-yard pass. They went back to the ground. They were actually faced with 4th and 1 from the 6-yard line, and Forte picked up another pair of yards up to pick up the first down. It was now 1st and goal from the 4. So the Bears are right there, ready to score. They wouldn't get it on the first couple plays. They actually went for a couple of passes. They were incomplete, and now it was 3rd and goal from the 4. Cutler dropped back to pass, and he hit Brandon Marshall for a 4-yard touchdown pass for their second touchdown connection in this game, and it was now 21-10, Chicago over Minnesota. So now the Vikings would take over on their own 40 with less than 9 minutes left in this game, and they would get into Chicago territory. They actually were faced with a 4th and 6 from the 39 of the Bears. Bridgewater dropped back, and he threw it to Johnson for a 24-yard reception that made a first down in the red zone on the Chicago 15. They then got to the 8-yard line, but their drive stalled, and so they brought out Blair Walsh to attempt a 26-yarder. It was up, it was good, and it was now 21-13 as the Vikings cut the Bears' lead to 8 points. The Bears now took over on their own 17 with about 4 minutes left in the fourth. They would end up punting the ball 5 plays later, and so now Minnesota took over with a chance to tie this game. They would need a touchdown and the 2-point conversion, and they had just over 2 minutes left on the clock. They had it on their own 34. Bridgewater dropped back, and he was sacked by Young for a 5-yard loss, and that brought it to the 2-minute warning. So now it was 2nd and 15 from the 29 of Minnesota. Bridgewater dropped back to pass, and he hit Johnson for a 21-yard reception that brought the ball to the 50. So now it was first down, and Bridgewater went to McKinnon, and he picked up 14 yards, and it was now a first down on the Chicago 36. Bridgewater then hit Johnson for a 7-yard pass, and it was 2nd and 3 from the 29. Bridgewater dropped back, and he was intercepted by Mundy, and Mundy seals the deal as he gets the Bears back the ball, and Jay Cutler takes the knee, and this game comes to a close, and the Chicago Bears win their first game in Soldier Field in 2014 with the final score, Chicago 21, Minnesota 13. So now the Bears are 4-6 on the season, and the Vikings are also 4-6. And the Bears are now 1-3 at home, as this is their first victory in Chicago this season. Jay Cutler was 31 for 43 with 330 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He also picked up 21 yards on the ground off of 5 carries. Teddy Bridgewater was 18 for 28 with 158 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And Matt Forte was the leading rusher with 117 yards off of 26 carries. He also picked up 58 yards off of 6 receptions. The leading receiver in the game was Alshon Jeffery with 135 yards off 11 receptions, one of which was for a touchdown. Brandon Marshall had 7 receptions for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns in the game. Johnson was the leading receiver for Minnesota, so he had 87 yards off of 6 receptions. That's Charles Johnson. And for the defense, the leading tackler in this game was Chad Greenway. He had 11 tackles for the Vikings. He was their leading tackler and the game's leading tackler. The Bears had 2 sacks. Jared Allen had a sack, and so did Young. So Willie Young and Jared Allen each had a sack. And Monday came up with that big interception at the end. The Vikings did have those 2 picks earlier on, Smith and Rhodes. But that one by Monday, that really sealed the deal, as this was a defensive battle. Marshall came up with those 2 touchdowns. Cutler threw 3 touchdowns. And the final score, Chicago 21, Minnesota 13.